Hi, everyone. My name is Atin Gupta. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Countable. And today we're going to talk about leveraging modern technologies in accounting firms. In case you don't know about it yet already, the future of accounting, 83% says adopt tech to remain competitive. We have to do that. Sage put an article out there in 2020. We have to, 83% of them. 40% of them struggle to understand what that really means. What is this current technology? How is it changing? We went from having maybe 200 apps to 700 or 800 apps in less than a decade. Technology is changing. Is it innovation? Is it changing things? Is it changing processes? Is it changing people, or everything? And what is our choice? Is it proactive or reactive? And we're so far behind, in my personal opinion, in terms of what technology needs to do in our landscape, that we are still very reactive. But this is what we're going to dig in more and talk to our speaker of today. So let me do a quick background and introduction. This fellow I get to know very recently, and we've attended a few conferences and get to see him in person and on virtually. He's done a few roundtables with us. He went from baseball to major in accounting. A complete transition. You'll probably see him wearing a hat at all times. He loves it. And started at Deloitte as an auditor and earned his CPA designation. I found a passion in helping small businesses. He loves and absolutely passionate about small businesses. Chase, how are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk.
Absolutely. I mean, and I will say the other reason that I wear a hat, beyond the baseball background, is I don't have as much hair on the top of my head as I once did. So it's an easy way to cover that up.
I will cut that out from the equation. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so vulnerable. I think this is one of the things that we don't do as men, as accountants, that we don't share very openly about how we feel, rather what people want to listen. And be an expert at all times. So thank you for sharing that. So before we get into the Q&A and before we talk deeper into what you're so passionate about and what amazing job you're doing, let's get to know Chase a little bit more. So rapid fire questions, don't think too much about it. 3 accounting skills that you struggled with the most when you were an auditor.
Organization, motivation, and attention to detail on non-stimulating projects.
And I'm sure this vision and mission has something to do with it, which we'll talk about in a second. If you have 25 hours in a day, how would you use an extra time?
Oh, that's a great question. I would probably pick up a secondary passion. I actually would like to be a DJ, actually a music producer in EDM at some point, but it's such a deep rabbit hole to go down with everything else going on that, maybe that would be where I would, focus my efforts.
Yeah. Okay. DJ, maybe we'll see you very soon. Floating around. So the best piece of advice you've gotten so far?
Yeah, that's interesting because someone asked me that the other day and I couldn't think of anything other than, for me, it isn't so much a piece of advice. It's having mentors and people that I can work alongside, notably my father-in-law, who's very successful in business, and just seeing how he approaches situations and conversations and learning from that has been hugely impactful in my development, because I think a lot of times you get advice and it's like you have to see that real world, situation that advice is tied to for it really to click. So, being able to see it from the, first person standpoint has been huge for me.
When I left the firm, I read this book, a quote from Gandhi, "Be the change you want to see." And it just resonates with me so much, resonated for a very long period of time. And then I learned a lot of the things along the way. So is there any particular quote that really resonates with you and that's a mantra for you?
There is a quote from Michael Jordan that I actually have on my website, and I'm probably going to butcher it, trying to recall it off the top of my head. But essentially it's about, there's people that want it to happen, there's people that, wish it would happen, and then there's those that make it happen. That's really the difference between an idea and a desire versus actually going out and doing it. And the doing is 90 to 95% of it, which I think a lot of people shy away from, because that's the hard stuff. But, in order to really have a vision come to life, being an operator, as you're probably very well aware of, is not easy.
What inspired you to really focus on digital transformation in accounting? And when did it really start and why?
I mean, for us, it was really in line with what we wanted to do, universally with our business. And that really is, there's so many folks out there that are either working at a firm, that is very behind in technology and very hierarchical, in the structure of the firm. And folks are really suffering from an existential crisis of, meaning and purpose, and what all of these hours, are really summing up to for their lives. Something that I felt like I suffered from a lot when I was an auditor.
A lot of people talk about technology. I think the industry is very well aware that technology is the forefront. It's not going anywhere. It's not a bubble. We need to change. I keep hearing it. I'm just about 5 years away from retirement or 10 years away from retirement. Why do we need to change? It's working fine. I'm making money. And things are going great. So what are your experiences when you're talking to folks? Like, where is this mindset coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of a general mindset that if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and if someone is, at the partner or, sole owner level, making great money and they feel like they've got a good work-life balance, they're less prone to want to reinvent the wheel, especially if they've got limited time left in their career. And I think a lot of times they don't necessarily feel the pain of the staff, that is suffering from that lack of technology. And, maybe they've forgotten exactly what it was like to be in that seat. Or maybe they're just of the mindset, look, I had to do it this way, my staff's going to have to do it this way. This is how you learn and how you grow. And it also comes down to who do you have in house, because if it all falls on a partner, they may not have that aptitude or vision to see what it should or could eventually look like. The other thing too is that, we're talking about a blank canvas. When it comes to what this is, there's, in terms of technology, there's so many different ways you could paint this picture, right? And it's going to be different for every firm because every firm works with different clients, works differently with those clients, and, has a unique case of how their own workflow, needs to work for them to be most efficient. So there's not a template out there, that you can just apply and run with. It really requires a deep dive into who the clients are you're serving, how you're serving them, what stack, you're using with those clients, what you're using internally, what your workflow looks like, and how you can architect your technology to support that. So it's a huge endeavor, and it's often fraught with, I don't even know where to start. And so I think that those are the things that get in the way of digital transformation.
Do you find, especially in the sole proprietors or smaller two-partner accounting firms, like the decision makers are basically very tied together, and if they're a partner or a sole proprietor, and it's a very difficult thing to find resources to be able to just separate yourself from it?
I really think that a lot of firm owners get stuck in being too involved in the client service. It's hard to be both in the weeds and above the trees at the same time. And you can obviously do that for a little while and then segment time to not be, that involved. But it's just from what I've seen and the conversations I've had with hundreds of firm owners, it's exceedingly difficult, especially with what's happened with the pandemic that has made a tax season not have a defined stop date, and there's always something, right? So I really think it starts with, getting the right people on board, even if you don't have the right processes and technology, getting the right people involved to help with that, but also help with the client service work and, be as high level as possible. So you're not the bottleneck as the firm owner or partner. And just to really allow you to free your time up to start looking at your business, from an external standpoint, not within the actual work, because you can't really read the label from inside the jar. You got to be outside of it to really understand, what's there.
So when you look at technology, I'm assuming you're trying to eliminate the bottom layer and also create more workflows and efficiencies. Where do you start generally? What kind of softwares do you say, hey, you have to have these first before we can even have a conversation?
It's important to understand that it's not just about technology, it's about your workflow in general. And also, when it comes to eliminating jobs or preparation or whatever, the way that we look at it is more technology is here to augment, because it's not going to entirely eliminate, preparation or review or any of that. It's there to augment the folks that are there to do it and make them as efficient and effective as possible.
So what are some of the things that you say people should really consider avoiding, mistakes that they can probably avoid by listening to some of the folks and just kind of haphazardly picking up a structure that may not work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is a new wave of, firms, and accountants in general that are sharing knowledge, right? And best practices and what's working for them and why and what's not. And I think that's super powerful because if you're just relying on the sales pitch from someone at a given app, you're going to get a one-sided view of what that is, and there's a whole different level of understanding to know what the actual practitioner is experiencing using that product.
Do you feel that the practitioners have a good pulse on what's needed when you walk in the door and trying to assist them?
Generally, our process is to, have one-on-ones and group conversations about, what are the pain points in their practice? What are the bottlenecks? What are the things that are giving them a headache and, not helping them move their practice forward? And then we say, look, okay, we've heard this is a consensus area as a highest priority, thing we need to solve for. So we all generally recognize that. Usually we'll say, okay, we're going to put a committee together, investigate kind of how we can change the script on this, and then make sure that we've got buy-in on the fact that there is a problem, and then a buy-in on the solution, that's not just from leadership, but it's from our principals and practitioners that, is based in the actuality of, what client service is.
Is it different for a desktop-based firm, which is purely legacy systems, using still the systems which are very disintegrated and siloed, for the lack of better words, just working fine, but may not be progressing in the right direction? Some are quasi, where they have adopted some technology from a workflow perspective, and then some are purely building up from ground up, cloud-based, and so on. Where do you find there's a huge difference in terms of time it takes to really do the transformation or transition?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a term out there which a lot of folks on this or listening or watching this conversation will probably be aware of, technical debt. And that's used or originated from code that was written quickly and not scalably, that works in the here and now, but has to be deconstructed and reconstructed at a later point. Right. The same thing happens for firms that are heavy on legacy systems because they're thinking within the box of what they have, and the disruption that's going to result for any sort of transformation or any sort of replacement of apps within that legacy system. But also those legacy systems, a lot of times, at least in accounting, are a digital version of a paper process, and so it's not even so much that the technology isn't what is going to move the firm forward. It's just that the technology is based on a way of working with clients that's no longer relevant in 2022. Because a lot of young accountants, when they see things in a tax workflow software, for example, that's based on a paper environment, it's like they can't even make that logical connection of, I don't understand this part of a process because I never worked in a paper environment, and therefore it's like, this doesn't even make sense. I'm just going to skip it and move on.
I get the mindset that folks understand the buy-in from the team. What do you do from an education standpoint? How you train practitioners, either managers, senior managers, partners, who are interacting with the clients to set the right expectations? So to make sure that we are setting the right bar and not creating this funnel of extreme stress and anxiety that, oh shit, I did this, I shouldn't have done that, and now I don't know what to do and I'm panicking. So how do you guys incorporate that into your strategy?
So I think there's a couple of considerations there. One, in terms of your internal folks, having a robust learning management system, and knowledge base for them to understand, how to use things beyond just, one-on-ones or group training sessions. The other point that brings up for me too, though, is being mindful of not just change fatigue and education on your internal folks, but also on the client, right? Because the client can't constantly be put through a change of how they're going to work with their CPA and what logins they need to keep track of without creating friction that can lead to churn. So you really need to be equally mindful of how this works internally versus how it works externally, because if the client experience is too ad hoc and there's too much friction in it, that's not going to serve your overall business objectives.
And how often do you actually look at it once the initial implementation of the strategy is in place? How do you evaluate success? How often do you come in and change the processes? Why is it relevant to change that often, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, on the client side, we're looking at NPS scores and comments left on that, to identify, where some of that friction might be, on the client side, because without their feedback, we're not ever fully going to know, whether that was a good client experience or not.
Yeah.
And then internally, it's by group huddles that we have and one-on-ones where we unpack what these pain points are, and did this software actually help you out? If not, was that the software itself? Was that your understanding and utilization of it? Just really diving deep into the true why of something or why something doesn't work, because just taking 30,000 foot comments and running with them often puts has you going in the wrong direction unless you truly understand what was broken for that person.
Yeah. Is there anything, if you want to summarize in maybe 3 or 4 things that are absolutely critical in short, simple sentences that folks should absolutely do no matter what?
So I'll frame this from the standpoint of, an owner or a partner, what their, top 3 or 4 things should be. Number one, understanding who you're out there to serve, what problems you're trying to solve, and what your mission is. People need a purpose and a why for doing the work they're doing. It's not that people are burned out because the hours they're working, that's part of it, but it's also because they're not seeing the greater why and the purpose of why they're putting in this effort and how that's impacting others' lives and improving their own life in the process. Another thing is understanding that part of the equation, who you're going to work with and why, and who you're going to attract from a talent standpoint, also influences how you're going to design your SOPs, your workflow. The other big thing, for Dark Horse's standpoint, I think is huge for any firm is get the proper alignment and structure, meaning, align your talent with your clients and with leadership in the firm as a whole in a meaningful way. Because if you don't have proper alignment, you're going to have conflicts of interest, and conflicts of interest are going to result in short-term relationships. To the extent that you can create long-term relationships on both sides, that's best for your business. And really a key component of that is making sure that you've got a structure that's well aligned, that compensates people for their performance and their output versus getting so focused on the input of their hours and the realization of those hours. I mean, people in their 20s and 30s and even 40s, are tired of that old system, and they're leaving firms like that to join firms like ours.
How do you motivate your team members?
Probably 2 main things. One is around their professional growth and the building of relationships with their peers. Constantly having people up level is a major way to motivate folks. But then the other side of it goes back to alignment. Our compensation is such that with any of our accelerators or principals, they're eating what they kill, so they've always got the motivation to go out there and bring in more business and work more efficiently, because that's going to be more money in their paycheck, a direct one-to-one connection. And also making sure the folks that support those principles, are similarly aligned and are bought into the larger vision of where we're going and are participating not just in the profitability, but also, in the equity of what we're building, because we're really here to, change public accounting for the better.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that wealth. Chase, it's absolutely appreciated. Have a wonderful weekend and the rest of the summer.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great conversation. And you as well.
Thank
See you
you.
later.